I'm not doing my emails while I address you. Good. I'm not really. Good morning, everybody. Joe Selby from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, and this is the day we've been waiting for a long time at PCORI. So excited to be here. So excited to be part of it. Appreciative to David Kent and his colleagues at Tufts, and very appreciative to the IOM for their work in organizing it and hosting it. I'll go out on a limb, but I'll go out confidently and say this is the most important meeting you will attend this year here at the at NAM or elsewhere. The most important. It may take 20 years to prove that it was the most important meeting, but I think after 20 years, it'll be clear that we furthered today an idea that has been in the back of the mind of everybody that professed to do evidence-based medicine for the last 30 years. There's been a nagging sense that we weren't quite getting it right. And there has been a huge backlash, I think, from physicians who in the 80s and 90s encountered evidence-based medicine for the first time and said, but you're not any longer allowing me to do what is basically my job, which is to personalize the treatment for the patient in front of me and to consider particularly their risks. So when I got to Washington, I had this, I was coming from the West Coast and I was pretty much a narrow outcomes researcher, and reading the legislation was an interesting experience. So one day I was reading, and this is fairly early on, the part of the legislation that says research shall be designed as appropriate to take into account the potential for differences in the effectiveness of healthcare treatments, services, and items as used with various subpopulations such as racial and ethnic minorities, women, age, and groups of individuals with different comorbidities, genetic and molecular subtypes, or quality of life preferences. And I said, I felt very patriotic at that point, that our Congress could have such insight to build this into a piece of legislation, right down to genetic and molecular subtypes. But 2 points, two further things to say about this. First, it wasn't a staffer or a congressman who had the insight to put this in here. It was, among others, the Personalized Medicine Coalition. So when I learned that a couple years later, that made a lot of sense. Still very grateful. The second thing, though, is in that list of characteristics of patients, personal risk was not there. And I think that was quite interesting, maybe considering the source, that's why. One of the things I like about today's discussions is there is a lot of consideration of personal risk as the stratifier, maybe the most crucial stratifier in terms of determining what works best for whom. I want to say a couple other things. First, that our methodology committee that is well represented here today, PCORI's methodology committee, built this into the original methodology standards. They recognized that this was an important part of taking comparative effectiveness to the next level. I want to also thank Dr. Evelyn Whitlock and Dr. Jennifer Croswell, who run this small but hopefully growing program into research on treatment heterogeneity and maybe on even to prediction of treatment benefits at PCORI. This project began as an engagement award to David and his group with the important charge of figuring out how stakeholders, patients and other stakeholders, what they're going to do with this evidence. One thing we're learning is that as you get more patient-centered in your evidence generation, the evidence that you generate gets more complex. So a crucial topic is, how do we talk about this? How do we prepare both patients and clinicians for using this information? That may be one of the greatest barriers, and it's fabulous that that's a big part of the agenda today. I'm just going to now go briefly through the agenda, quibble with one title maybe, and then get this meeting on its way. So the first session is moderated by Harry Selker, and it's called The Overview of Heterogeneous Treatment Effects. So this will set the stage for the day. The subtitle, Moving from Evidence-Based Medicine to Personalized Precision Medicine. I hope that's not what we think, that we're going back in time. hopefully we're moving to evidence-based medicine 2.0. That evidence-based, I mean, it's people in evidence-based medicine, I think, that identified this problem and have done the work to date. And I think it's people from evidence-based medicine that will carry us forward into a generation where we do think of the individual as we apply evidence. And the rest of this day then is dedicated to figuring out just how to do that. The next topic, which is moderated by Nilay Shah, is, no, that's not right. I've got my pages wrong. The next topic is, it has a promise that is going to be tough to meet, I think, which is an equation-free presentation of new methods for prediction. If that comes true, I'll be delighted. And Dr. Steyerberg, I'm not going to try your first name. Evat, okay. Evat will lead that. The third, then we get to the very typically PCORI portion of the agenda, which is the discussion with stakeholders, and our old friend Bray Patrick Lake will moderate that session. And as I said, how we get this approach and this, this new level of evidence into the thinking of patients and clinicians is a crucial question. The last one, maybe the most critical, is how do we build it into everyday practice, from research into practice, implementation and oversight, and that's Dr. Nilay Shah. So that's the day. I think I've said everything I intended to say, and so one thing I've forgotten who I turn it over to at this point. So to Harry. Dr. Harry Selker, thanks for being here, Harry, and have a good day, everyone.